For 10 years, EI and OECD have worked together on the International Summit for Teaching and Learning. This has led to us having a deeper understanding that working together on issues of common concern will help the people of the world, particularly our children. Nowhere has that resulted in clearer work than the work we've just done on EI and OECD's effective and equitable education recovery principles. And I want to give a special thanks to David Edwards from EI and Andreas Schleicher from OECD for their wisdom and dedication in making this partnership happen. We are in unprecedented times. Nobody dreamed that a worldwide pandemic would disrupt education all over the world and for this long all over the world. And nobody could imagine the devastating impact this disruption would have on an already inequitable system where we already had the kind of differences between countries in the global north and the global south. In response to any crisis, we should be working together to ensure that we rebuild something better than what we had, than the status quo. But these principles, the EI and OECD effective and equitable education recovery principles, yes, that is a mouthful, is a blueprint that not only goes beyond the status quo, but it helps the world's schools educate children not only during these hopefully last few months of the pandemic, but it gives us a blueprint of how to recover and how to promote the goals of education post-pandemic to build better, more equitable school systems in the future. These principles are about transforming schools to address the scourge of inequality, of inequity, that is far too common in schools all throughout the world. Inequity in investment, in access to academic and enrichment programs, in discipline, and so much more. As Andreas has said many times, you can't have, or you can only have a great school system when you have an equitable school system. It's so true. We should use these principles to break down those inequalities, to bridge the gaps, and implement an educational recovery that places equal access and support for our most vulnerable students at the center of each and every action and decision we make. Let me discuss a few of these principles. One of the things the pandemic revealed is the absolute importance of doing whatever we can to keep schools open for safe in-person instruction. The importance of bricks and mortar schools and the role they play in learning, in addressing the social and emotional needs of children and adults, cannot be overstated. The EI-OECD principles are based on this fundamental truth. And although distance learning was, because of the pandemic, the best option for some schools, particularly at the height of the pandemic, communities struggled, particularly in gaining or getting kids the remote instruction they needed, the internet, computers, and worse, children needed the social interaction and the support services that only school buildings can provide. As we begin to get everyone vaccinated and put the other mitigation strategies in place, we must do everything possible to obviously make schools safe, but to keep school buildings open. And once we get students back in schools, we have to directly address their emotional, social, and academic needs. It can't be what we left in March 2020. We must be more robust and more equitable to better meet the needs of all of our students. Beyond the essential services for our students, the principles address the needs of teachers in their professional lives. If we're going to make schools better, then the professionals in each and every classroom, as well as those who are bus drivers, those who do food services, those who are clinicians, we must give them the freedom to teach. We must provide new and effective professional learning opportunities. And once those lessons and that support is had, classroom teachers have to have the autonomy to use their professional judgment to meet the needs of every child. Certainly, as the pandemic began, we gave them a lot of autonomy as they turned on a dime to revert from in-school to remote. Let's remember that as we go back to being in school, what these educators have done. The principles also tackle one of the most perplexing questions for education during this pandemic. What's the proper role of education technology now and moving forward? The pandemic taught us there is a role for technology in education, and of course we must embrace this reality. But we have to make sure that educators are well trained and direct how technology is used with and for their students. The EI OECD principles unequivocally state that teachers must have a consequential voice as technology is developed for the classroom. Technology will never replace teachers or brick and mortar schools. That has been made plain in the aftermath of this pandemic. But technology is an invaluable tool that helps teachers reach more students and helps improve outcomes. Another fundamental truth repeatedly found in these principles is how I started today, the necessity of collaboration. Throughout the principles, the importance of teacher unions, administrators, and governments working together to create a better and more equitable system is a core belief and must be acted on in that manner. What both EI and OECD know from research and experience is that when school stakeholders work together, the result is better outcomes for all of our students. This is the lesson that the adults should truly learn as we emerge from this COVID pandemic. Finally, there's another fundamental truth we must face, that all this returning, rebuilding, recovery, and ensuring better systems take a lot of resources and relationships. The EI OECD principles are an important step, but if governments do not step up and fund these principles, we may emerge from the pandemic with school systems struggling to hold on to what they had in March 2020. We can't let that happen. All of us must urge our elected political leaders to properly fund schools as we tackle all of these issues. We can't do it alone. The world's students deserve our best efforts and the funding that will make those efforts successful. Again, relationships and resources. I want to thank EI and OECD again for all this hard work. And now the harder work begins, implementing these principles in our schools and in our countries. I hope all of you and your families are safe and healthy, and I long for the day when we can all come together face to face and lift up each other's successes, and most importantly, our children's success. We will see the end of this public health crisis, and if we do the work of these principles, we will be far better and our children will be far better in the future than they have been in the past. Thank you.